Welcome back to Purrfect Takes. I'm your host, Stephen Patton, joined as always by my dear friend and co host, Jake LaQuire. And for you guys, for this week, when we are doing our free agency primer, we are a little less than a week away from the tampering period beginning. We have a special guest, and he simply goes by Frack. He claims to be the owner of Purrfect Takes, so he decided to take a step into the light and introduce himself for you guys as the audience as we kick off this special edition before free agency.
Thank you for having me. Usually I'm behind the scenes of Perfect Takes, and I let y'all do all that, but here we are, and
He
let's start off with a big old roar, right?
Go for it.
Row, row.
I- If you're listening, that's the actual Panthers roar. Frack is the progenitor of that. He's also the owner of Angry Ales. I believe his picture is up on the wall there. So really big around Charlotte, and we are happy that Frack could join us for this episode. You mentioned it, Steve. The tampering period, I think, is next Monday. We're sitting here on a Tuesday afternoon, evening recording, so a little less than 6 days. And I guess last week, right at the combine, we got some news regarding some pretty significant news, I would say, regarding the Panthers and how they're going to look this year. We had already seen that Daryl Bevel, the former offensive coordinator, had been hired, and he has some familiarity with head coach Dave Canales. But at the podium, Dave Canales said that he is no longer calling plays, that Brad Idzik, the offensive coordinator slash, I think he was the QB coach as well, he is going to be calling plays this season, uh, like just straight up, bar none. He is the play caller. He'll call them in the preseason and in the season. Quite the drastic move for Canales, who I think play calling was part of his identity. But it's something you and I, Steven, had talked about pretty much at length the last 2 years when we've been disappointed with a lot of the performances, that the play calling and the sequencing and the game management, all that wasn't tied together. Now, hopefully, Canales can take a step back and focus on the more broad part of the game, like fourth downs, timeouts, all that, and hopefully everything will be more seamless.
Yeah, the last time you guys heard from us, we actually didn't know about the Darrell Bevel signing. That was something that we wanted to talk about. And before kind of things kicked off at the combine and some of the interviews, we were actually speculating like, is he going to become kind of the designated play caller? Like, what is his role in the offense? And then come around, find out with some of these interviews, like Dave Canales steps back. He's like death to ego in a sense that his offense, he's relinquishing the play calling, allowing himself to do more of the head coaching job, role, responsibilities, everything that comes and entails with that, and to be able to step back and allow Brad Idzik and Daryl Bevel to be the driving force. Again, I think Dave Canales has a lot of respect for Daryl Bevel because he was the OC when he was over with the Seattle Seahawks. So Dave Canales was actually underneath him. So there's a lot of respect and mutual understanding between the two. And I think this is a great step forward for the Carolina Panthers. I think they're going to be able to find a lot more win probability along the margins and find ways to win games that they weren't able to this past year. So definitely a step in the right direction, in my opinion. Any thoughts on this, Frack? Was this something that like piqued your curiosity, or just something you kind of glossed over when it hit the news?
I'm excited about this. I mean, he spent time, with Russ and Stafford. Noticeably made them better, in my opinion. And there was a rumor, a story that Stafford wouldn't have demanded a trade from Detroit if Bevel was still OC. So, I mean, those are two quarterbacks that had great careers under him. I'm excited about it. I think it's good for Bryce Young, and we'll see what happens.
Well, and I think Idzik too, right? Just it's not going to be too much of a different offense, I think, but it's going to be, I think, a lot of the confusing stuff that we saw or that we were scratching our heads with Canales is going to change, right? Like if you look at the game 17, right, where all those horrible ref calls were being made and we couldn't really do anything about it because Canales had to worry about the next play instead of kind of challenging the refs. I think that'll be fixed. And a lot of the stuff that we had complained about on this show, like for instance, the 49ers game, right? Where there were only 6 running back runs that entire game. or there was a game earlier in the year where we just neglected to pass the ball deep at all. Like I think it's going to be a much more balanced approach, considering that Idzik has been the guy designing the game plans. It was just Canales calling the plays. So I think it's a good change. I think both the Bevel hire and Idzik stepping up to the plate are going to be positive changes for the Panthers this year, in a year where we need to take a step. Right, we won the division last year, but it was still an 8-9 record, and I believe the offense was 25th, 26th in points per game. So even though we might think it was a better year, the offense still needs to score a lot more points.
And part of that is also looking ahead to the offseason and going, okay, what do we need to do as a team to get better so that these coaching changes that we've made actually kind of impact what we see on game day? And I think it starts with looking at like cuts and restructures so that we're ready for free agency in this tampering period. And clearly, you've seen through the news cycle, guys like Ashawn Robinson, Andy Dalton have been put on the trade block, so to speak. And I think really that's just to see if there's any interest that if a team wants to do like a pick swap or send a like a day 3 pick to acquire a player and not have to kind of be in a bidding war for said candidate. I think that is what the past week or so has kind of opened the door for. But I think honestly, Ashawn Robinson, a guy like Tommy Tremble, I kind of alluded to Andy Dalton, but we'll see if there's a team that kind of bites and wants a backup quarterback and likes what they saw from Andy Dalton. Obviously, the one game against Buffalo last year was pretty abysmal. But if you were to cut Ashawn Robinson, you were to cut Tommy Tremble, you're saving close to like $17 million. And that opens up some wiggle room to sign a veteran or two free agent on the market and pretty much kind of start filling out the roster. And so are there any other candidates or guys you see along the roster that you think could save us some money or are kind of dead weight and could really be like given a shot at free agency and maybe a new team that find a better allocation for their skills?
So we're gonna have to make some space regardless, like whether it's cuts, restructures, what have you. After the cap number came in, I think it was Monday, yesterday. The Panthers have about 10 million in cap space, and you're like what you allocate for draft picks is close to 6 million, like between 6 and 8 million. So if you take that away, you have space for like one vet minimum contract in free agency. So they're going to have to make room. You mentioned Ashawn Robinson, Tommy Tremble. They're going to have to restructure their stars, right? Like J.C. Horn, Derek Brown. I think those are safe players to restructure because you don't really envision cutting them anytime soon, right? J.C. Horn, I think he made his second straight Pro Bowl. Derek Brown should have made the Pro Bowl, should have made All Pro. We talked about that during our last episode regarding our team drafts. Shout out my team, by the way, who won that the team draft there. But they're going to have to make room. You wrote down in our notes here that if they restructure those two and cut the two people you mentioned, that creates just under 50 million in cap space, which would bring us up to 60 total, which is pretty like that's around the top
Well,
of the
no.
league currently.
That is
Oh, it
with our
would bring
current.
us up to 50.
Yeah. That's
Which
with our
is
current.
that's a lot of wiggle room, and that could leave like a lot of opportunity to sign high tier free agents. I don't know if they want to sign high tier free agents because of the compensatory formula down the road, but I think the Panthers they certainly need to make space, is how I would put it. Are there any players you would hate to see cut, Frack, that are on the cutting block? Like I know Ashawn Robinson, he's been a good player over the past couple of years, but the amount that they've invested in the defensive line, I feel like somebody has to be on the chopping block.
There's no disagreement there. I want to add someone that I think we should cut and can save money on. Jonathan Brooks. I mean, he's missed 2 years from injuries that like aren't really come back from, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I mean, 2 years out, we can draft another replacement, cut him, and
I'm
it'll
always
get us.
team draft a running back every year, but I think the front office likes Brooks a lot. I mean, they did spend a second rounder on him, but if they feel like his rehab isn't coming along, that's certainly a place they could look, right? Because I don't think they're going to bring Rico Dowdle back, but you have Chuba Hubbard, right, who's presumably going to be the starter. They drafted Trevor Etienne last year, who let's say he had a rocky role there as the punt returner, especially in that last game. But I think he has some stuff like on third down. He could be a pass catching back. So if they want to draft somebody, Brooks could be somebody that they look to cut. I don't think that's a bad option at all.
I I'll go out on a limb here and disagree. I think when you trade up for a player, and obviously he's been disappointing coming off the ACL injury he was coming out of from college and then re-tearing that ACL his rookie year. I think the goal was with the Rico Dowdle signing this past year is that he was buying you the year that you're losing with Jonathan Brooks in his second year. And you're hoping to see him kind of give you some of that rookie surplus you're hoping from that position in year 3 and year 4. So honest to goodness, I think if anything, I would throw out the name Chuba Hubbard. I think Chuba Hubbard is getting a little older, a little bit more expensive. You probably save some more money getting him off the books than you would a guy like Jonathan Brooks on a rookie contract. So I get the disappointment, Frack. I was disappointed when we chose him. I thought it was a waste of resources then. But I think at this point there's a sunk cost, and the hope and expectation is that he actually lives up to the hype this coming fall and maybe the next year. And I think pairing him with Trevor Etienne, going along with what Jacob said, maybe spending a day 2, day 3 pick. And if we're spending a day 2, it's got to be like late, like third round. But it's one of those situations when you're getting to pick 100 or later that if you were to add another running back in this class, I think I would be down for that. Moving, I think, ahead to extensions, a guy that I think should be retained no matter what. And it's just a matter of because he's a exclusive rights free agent because he hasn't played in the league long enough and he was an undrafted free agent is Jalen Coker. We could just sign him to a 1-year, $1 million deal and be done with it. And that would obviously save us a little bit of headache going into this year. But I think this is a player that has lived up to the expectation and has earned, I think, what Rashid Shaheed got with the New Orleans Saints in a similar situation a couple years ago. That was kind of like a 2-year deal, around like $6-7 million. I think I would pay like Jalen Coker $7.5 million 2-year extension, kind of get him through what would have been like a true rookie contract, and then relook at like a true extension. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that is a direction I think in terms of retaining young talent that has proven fruitful, a direction this team needs to go.
Well, I don't want to speak for Frack, but I think you got to keep Jalen Coker, right? To me, he's the clear receiver 2 on this roster. He had the breakout game in the playoffs where he had, I think it was the 3rd most yards in franchise history in a playoff game behind Steve Smith and Muslim Muhammad, the 2 great playoff receivers that we've had. And he had an excellent game. He had that go-ahead touchdown there at the end. Obviously, we lose, but you have to find a way to keep Coker. The thing is with Coker, because he's exclusive rights, we can match anything, and you don't really have to give him a top of the market deal. And the other thing is the injury history, right? In his first year, he didn't make the 53, or he made the initial one, but then got cut and was put on the practice squad. And then to start this past season, he was on IR, right? And he missed the first 5 or 6 games. I think he came back after that Cowboys game, so that'd be his first 6 games. That's kind of an iffy start to his career, but I think you got to keep Coker, and I think Frack would agree with that one.
100%. I'm a Coker fan. I mean, obviously we didn't really see much of him, but the impact and also the excitement from the fans that we saw when he was in the game, I mean, it just speaks volume.
Those the deep touchdown versus the Saints, I thought was one of the better plays. Well, the Rams one, of course, as well on 4th down, but the go ball against the Saints that Bryce Young had, that touchdown, I thought was super impressive as well. You wrote down a couple more free agents here that we probably should bring back. The O line, I think, has to be sorted out first, though, because Ike Ekwonu probably going to miss this year, the starting left tackle. So you got to figure something out there. And then we don't have a center right now, right? Cade Mays, Austin Corbett, I think Brady Christensen, all those guys are free agents. So out of those guys, who are we going to bring back, you know?
Yeah, the interesting part with that is that obviously Cade Mays, Brady Christensen, that's homegrown talent. Josh Nyman's also a free agent. Like you mentioned, Austin Corbett. Austin Corbett, with his injury history, with how much older he's getting, and again, like I think his true position is playing guard. I think it's best to kind of let him test free agency, but I think keeping that homegrown talent is really critical. And obviously, you and I went back and forth before getting on air, Jacob, but I think Cade Mays, if he gets suitors in free agency, could be pushing what like Tyler Biadasz got a couple of years ago, going from the Dallas Cowboys to the Washington Commanders, which would kind of be in the range of like a 3-year deal, maybe somewhere in the like 10, $11 million range contract. And I think if the team sees him as a stalwart guy, as somebody that you can build around, and he's only going to keep improving as a player and how young he is, that's something I think you could offer on the table. I think he has definitely potentially earned that based on his play last year. Again, if that's a direction you don't want to go, there are a lot of free agent centers, and maybe you're able to get a guy that wants to play with this group for a year or two, and you're able to find kind of a stopgap while you're looking in the draft and free agency moving forward. Brady Christensen, I think he has the ability to play tackle, ability to play guard, and when we're dealing with the Ike Ekwonu injury, I think that is valuable. The biggest thing is he's missed a lot of time with injuries over the past couple of years, so that's my biggest kind of asterisk. But if he wants to come back on another 1-year deal like he did last year, I think that would be fantastic for both sides.
The Cade Mays one, a little too expensive for my blood. I think that you can find a center for less than that, kind of like how the Panthers did, because we cut him and then got him off of, I think it was the Giants practice squad 2 years ago when we were dealing with injuries. But if they feel like he's irreplaceable and his impact versus when Corbett's been center, how Bryce Young has played and how the run game's gone, I can understand wanting to keep him. Anybody that you would want to keep, Frack, that are free agents? I know you're a big fan of the punter that we have, Sam Martin. He had a pretty good year this past year. I thought he was a little bit better than Johnny Hecker, to be honest. So I think bringing him back would be a pretty prudent move, so to speak.
Keep Cade, man. All I gotta say. I don't care if we overpay a little bit, but I mean he's young. You know,
He
it's
also Austin Corbett, and I always have this gripe whenever he's brought up. Cade Mays, everything seemed to flow so seamlessly. Excuse me. When Corbett was in, he's the guy that would step on Bryce's ankle all the time, and he was the guy that would snap the ball late. So if that's something that Brad Idzik needs in his first year, is that stability, then I agree. You got to keep Cade.
I think with Corbett's injury history, we let him walk. Plain
Yeah,
and
and
simple.
he's older as well, right? This
Yep.
is like year 8 or something for him, year 9. So I would agree there. I think Christian Roseboom also is a free agent. I don't. Our linebackers were okay last year, so I'm not going to be upset if they let him go. The thing about linebackers, though, is, and we can kind of transition into, I guess, the free agency beyond the Panthers. Dan Morgan, who's our general manager, former linebacker here, right? We had all the great linebackers. He said that that's a position that we need to attack in free agency this year, and so I think that one of the big ticket items we are going to go after is going to be a starting linebacker in free agency, and the big name is Devin Lloyd from Jacksonville. He's a guy who former first round pick, had a breakout year this year. He had a couple of pick sixes. I remember, I think one was against the Chiefs. It was like a pivotal moment in that game that went to overtime, and the Jaguars eventually won. But you got to field real starters at linebacker. Even when Trevin Wallace was out there, our linebacker core has been bad the last 2 years. So I think that's one position that Dan Morgan and the Panthers are going to have to attack.
Yeah, the linebacker position's got to be an emphasis. I think Trevin Wallace coming back from injury, maybe you re-sign Christian Roseboom, but you got to add another guy in free agency, whether that's a Devin Lloyd, a Caden Ellis,
And it
maybe
has to be a
Alex.
starter, right?
Yeah, no, it's got to be one of those guys. Like it's got to be a veteran like Lloyd, Ellis, Singleton, or if you go a different direction where it's a younger guy that's hitting free agency, like one of the Georgia guys and Quay Walker, N'Kobe Dean. Like you got to get somebody that's going to be a day one starter, and then you probably got to address it again in the draft. I know a lot of people are talking about Jacob Rodriguez out of Texas Tech, and we'll talk about kind of like some draft strategies. He obviously had a huge combine performance, so he may not be there in round two. But that's a guy, if he's for some reason there at pick 51, like you got to swing for the fences, in my opinion, because that's going to be another starter along with that group and nucleus you're trying to rebuild. And I think Dan Morgan, being a former linebacker, knowing the linebacker legacy here in Carolina, that's going to be a huge point of emphasis this offseason.
It's got to be the number one spot they attack. Do you how you feeling about linebacker, Frack? I know I feel like every time we've talked about the Panthers or after Panthers games, it was like how much we would allow the other team to run the ball on us, right? And it starts with the D line, but it's really the linebacker spot that I think was the key weak point for our defense.
I think we need to go in there and not be scared about spending some money because I mean it's going to be a pretty penny, and I mean
Mhm.
it's a key position, and like you said, it's not just the D line. Like the linebacker really makes the impact, and I'm huge on Devin Lloyd. I think that's who we should tackle and go after.
And linebacker, especially for the Panthers, right? Because we went from Sam Mills to Dan Morgan himself, John Beeson, Thomas Davis, Luke Kuechly. You can throw Shaq Thompson there if you want. He's not quite on that level, but there's been quite the drop off. So I wouldn't even mind signing two of these guys, but it's going to be expensive, the linebacker spot. The other key spot that Morgan talked about at the combine was edge rusher, right? And they needed to attack the pass rush. Our edge rushers haven't been great in the Evero era since he's been our defensive coordinator, but they also haven't spent real or invested real stuff in it in free agency, right? Jadeveon Clowney was signed to a lower deal. DJ Wadham's going to be a free agent now. Pat Jones was the guy last year that we signed. He missed, I think, almost the whole year, right? He was out after week 3 or 4. So I think that they're going to have to, if they don't want to spend money in free agency in the middle of the defense, you got to spend a pretty penny, as Frag said there, on one of the premier edge rushers. Like it's got to be Jalen Phillips, Odafe Owe. If you aren't going to do that, then there are a lot of other guys too, like Marcus Davenport, trading for like a Kayvon Thibodeau, that kind of thing. But we need, just like we need starting linebackers, we need another starting edge rusher.
I think when you look at like Nick Scorton's body type, DJ Wanham, Patrick Jones, they're kind of like these 6'3", 6'4", approaching like 250, 260 pounds. And I know they aren't flashy names like you brought up, like the Jalen Phillips and some of these other guys that are kind of your big name dudes, but like a guy like a Derek Barnett or a Quiddy Pay. Like, and if you can get like maybe two or three of those guys, you threw out Marcus Davenport, or maybe you're able to get David Ojabu or Aziz Ojolari, who a little bit smaller. I think they remind me of like when we had Clavon Chasen on the roster a couple years ago, where it's an outside linebacker you can bring on third down so they can get after the quarterback. You got to have variety and build an edge room, because the thing is we signed DJ Wanham 2 years ago and he was out with a heart condition, and that's not his fault. He was dealing with a health issue and he's been trying to fight back with that. And then, like you said, Patrick Jones, he went out earlier this past season and it didn't play the rest of the year. And those were guys that you were expecting to be key contributors, and they really didn't show up. So obviously, you hope Nick Scorton, Princely Uman Milan in year two take a step, but you got to add some more depth in terms of veteran presence and potentially a guy or two in the draft as well, like you did last year, to really beef up that room, just like the linebacking room or linebacker room. And that's, again, that front seven is so key to what we need to do on defense. And if you're keeping a zero Evero, you're going to have to give them guys to work with. Otherwise, we're just going to keep seeing the same result.
I know before we were recording, Frack was talking about maybe a guy like Max Crosby. There are pros and cons, but having a guy like that on the roster would be huge. They Trey Hendrickson also just didn't get tagged, so a couple of big name guys out there. But I know Max Crosby was one that we were talking about beforehand.
I mean, that'd be a dream come true if we landed one of them. But it's not that realistic. We can keep our hopes up. I mean, I don't really know much to say about that. All I'm gonna say is like defense wins games, and I think it helped us out a lot this year. And like I said, if we want to win games, we gotta spend some money. Linebacker, edge, like that's gonna make the impact that we need.
If we had some linebackers and edge rushers there during that 2 minute drill in the playoffs, I think we advanced, and we could have beaten the Bears. Who knows? That would have been a fun game, regardless. But you got to attack the defense, like Frack is talking about. Safety as well, I think, is another spot. I like what Trevon Merrick brings, but you got to find somebody who's rangier on the back end to pair with him, while the Lathan Ransom, last year's rookie, continues to grow and evolve. But All three levels of the defense need to be addressed.
I think with Mo Rig, like his best spot is being in the box and close to the line of scrimmage. So obviously Nick Scott's a free agent. I don't really see him returning with the Panthers. I feel like it's Xavier Woods of a couple years ago, and he wasn't even on that level. But it's finding that guy that's going to play free safety for you and be just a guy that's ball hawk in the middle of the field. And I like Kobe Bryant from the Seattle Seahawks. I think that's a guy that has a relationship with Mike Jackson, who's already on the roster. They both came into the league the same year, and I think he might be a selling or like be able to sell Kobe Bryant to come here to Charlotte. If not, a guy like Geno Stone, whose time is up in Cincinnati. He was really good with the Baltimore Ravens a couple years ago. Kind of tailed off a little bit with Cincinnati, but that had more to do with the guys working in front of him. I don't think that was necessarily a reflection of his play. It's finding a playmaker on that back end that's going to allow that secondary to really just clamp down, because you have answers in J.C. Horn and Mike Jackson and Mo Rig playing close to the line of scrimmage. You need that guy that can play the middle of the field, and I think there are a couple options this year in free agency.
This might be a hot take, but besides J.C. Horn and Mike Jackson, our corner room is really weak, and depth matters, especially
Agreed.
late in the season. So may not be something that we want to focus on, but I think it would help us a lot.
I think
I
corner
think
is a dark horse for the first round if one of the corners they like falls there.
that's a little rich for me. I like a guy like Rasul Douglas, who's been a journeyman. He's actually had time in Carolina, but like finding guys in free agency, I think could definitely help you if you're able to convince some of these guys to take a 1-2 year contract, and it doesn't break the bank, and they're in a spot where they feel like they're playing good ball in a good cornerback room. And so again, it just depends on what Dan Morgan's doing, what the plan is for the offseason, if it is to attack it in the draft. And I think there are guys on day 2, day 3 that we can talk about that are corners. But day 1, I really feel like, especially with the holes in the trenches, you got to attack the defense or offensive line.
For sure. I think we can kind of get to the last part of today's episode talking about the day one targets. We'll get more in depth in the draft as the draft approaches. But like you said, it's a trench league, right? Every year we see, you and I were counting it the other day. What did we see? Like 17 offensive and defensive, if you include edge rushers, offensive and defensive linemen go in round one. A similar number is projected to go this year in round one. So I think it's got to be a trench player. The tackle position on offense, right, is going to be interesting with Ike Ekwonu out. Like maybe a guy like Georgia's Monroe Freeling falls, but after his combine performance, who knows? I think defensive tackle, though, is the spot that a lot of fans may not want them to invest in because we've spent a lot of money there in free agency. But if I'm making the pick, I would take one of Peter Woods from Clemson or Caleb Banks from Florida. Both of those guys, I think, can beef up our trenches. And eh, pass rush doesn't always come from the edge; it can come from inside, right? Derek Brown had 5 sacks last year, and putting either of those guys beside him, I think, helps not only improve the pass rush but also the run for the new linebackers, whoever they are, to help clean up.
So I think when we look at like the guys available, I'm right there with you that it's like Peter Woods, Caleb Banks. If either one of them are there, I love it. Caleb Banks would really play the nose tackle position that Ashawn Robinson was, and he's a bigger dude than Ashawn Robinson. So you talk about the ability to stop the run, to plug holes, take on two blockers, allow Derek Brown and Turk Wharton to really get after the quarterback as kind of like three techs in a like an odd front 3-4 kind of setup. Like that's huge. And then if you were to add a Peter Woods, like okay, maybe Cam is a Cam Jackson that we also got from Florida last year late in the
Yes.
draft. Him and Bobby Brown, they're able to play more the nose tackle position, and he frees up and is allowing Derek Brown and Turk Wharton to come off the field. So they aren't playing as many snaps. You have a good rotational aspect there, and like he's a guy that I think was played out of position at Clemson this past year, which makes his tape look worse playing nose tackle because he drops 15 pounds before the year. He's playing sub 300, and then you're asking him to pretty much like play the middle of the defense, and it's a lot to ask. And I mean, he held up well, he did his job, but I think again, like where we talk about like a guy like Nick Scorton last year, he was a guy that the Panthers front office had a first round grade on, but because of a poor final junior year, he fell and he fell into our lap and he had a great year, I think, as a rookie for us. And so, like those kind of situations, I don't think you can pass up. But like you said, with Ike Aquanu's injury, if you have a guy like Monroe Freeling out of Georgia fall into your lap, like it would be hard for me to also pass up on a guy of his caliber because that immediately fixes that left tackle position and potentially gives you an answer at right tackle when Ike Aquanu does come back from his injury when Taylor Moton retires in a couple of years or we move on from him. So again, I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those picks. I think you could also throw an edge with TJ Parker. I'm not so no sure about like Cassius Howell. But those are guys that, like, I think from a physical prototype standpoint, if they're there and some of these interior defensive linemen, offensive tackles aren't on the board, I'd be much more comfortable taking them. I'll throw out a dark horse here, and it's a guy that I think could fall based on just some of the, I would say, draft interviews and how he's perceived across the league. But I think Makai Lemon out of USC is one of those guys where I liked his production, and he is a smaller guy, but you want to play him in the slot. Jalen Coker and T Mac are already bigger wide receivers. I think he's a playmaker that you really could add to the perimeter. And I know people are throwing around Kenyon Sadiq out of Oregon. I would much rather Makai Lemon than him in the first round. And we'll see if that's a direction they go, but that's a dark horse candidate I would throw out for pick 19.
I don't know if I can. Oh, go ahead.
I'm big on Sadiq. I'm sorry. I have to put that out there. A tight end is a position that we can upgrade, whether it's a draft or free agency. Bryce clearly loves throwing to tight ends. Our current room isn't bad, but it's not elite. So I mean, that would be nice. You know, if Pitts or Likely were even like available and somehow for like a good price, I wouldn't mind. But I'm big on Sadiq.
Well, Pitts, I believe, got the franchise tag, if I'm not mistaken. So he's going to be a Falcon this year. I'm with you. Like the thing with Sadiq is it's hard for a first round tight end, but I think the fit would be huge for the pick because you've already gotten the receivers you need. You presumably have your running back room for this year. So to add a tight end that's more athletic than all of our other, he's probably a better athlete than our receivers as well. Maybe he gets up there with them, but somebody that athletic who's strong enough to get involved in the blocking game with the new play caller, I can see the vision, but it's hard for me to, I guess, justify it. The tight end spot, especially after 2 straight years of receiver picks, and that's why I wanted to give a little pushback on Makai Lemon as well. I think he would fit in pretty well, but you got to remember we drafted Xavier Leggett in the first round. We drafted T Mac in the first round last year. In terms of team building, I'm not sure that that's the direction. I don't know if they want to go 3 straight years at receiver, and then that would make it 5 straight years in the first round on offense. So who knows? But I like the fit for both of those guys, Kenyon Sadiq, the tight end, and Makai Lemon, the wide receiver. I think we're close to takes territory here. And Frack, since you are the guest today, you can go first, you can go last. We'll let you decide. But what is your perfect take regarding today's topic? Like your hot take that 100% will come true if you're me, and then 100% won't come true if you're Steve. Well, we can revisit that later.
I'll go last.
You'll go last. All right, I have mine
Wow,
ready.
he passes the baton. So yeah,
Well,
Jacob, take the
he
stage.
needs time. It's kind of an ambush, but we'll give him time to formulate his take. I think this is a pretty cut and dry one. Dan Morgan talked about how certain positions need to be attacked in free agency, but also brought up the compensatory formula down the line, how they may not want to continue to overpay free agents. I think this is maybe the last free agency of this group of the team in which the front office is going to spend big on players. I think we're going to see this is the take. I think the Panthers are going to give a defender a 20 million plus per year contract this offseason, whether that's Devin Lloyd, whether that's Odafe Owe, the Chargers edge rusher who was not tagged. We learned a couple hours ago. It's going to be somebody they're going to spend big, and I think that it's going to be in the realm of $20 million. Nobody got that, or no Panther got that in free agency last year, I should say. I think Trayvon Merrick was the closest. I think he's at 17 per year, maybe 16 per year. And then obviously 2 years ago, Robert Hunt got 20 million per year to play guard. I'd say both of those have been positive returns. So I think this is the last year they're going to spend big. And I think it's, if I had to make a guess, I think it's going to be Devin Lloyd, but we'll see.
I could see it. I don't know if he gets 20 mil. I know some of the like projections are probably around like the 15 mil mark that some of the linebackers got. I think like Nick Bolton and whatnot with their extensions last year. So I could definitely see him approaching 20 mil. I think if any person hits that number, it would be if we got a high profile edge rusher, just because the market for that position is so much higher and a lot more saturated in terms of just like guys getting paid $40 million a year
Right.
with like your Miles Garrett, your Micah Parsons. So I think if anybody hits that, it's probably an edge rusher. But if Devin Lloyd were to get it, I could definitely see it's more beefed up and probably like not necessarily as many guaranteed years on the back end and allowing us wiggle room if for some reason he doesn't pan out the way we expect. I'm gonna go in a different direction. This was a note I had on the podcast. I briefly mentioned it. Frack kind of went against me, and then you brought in the perfect takes. But I do not think the Panthers take Kenyon Sadiq in the first. I think it is a waste of a pick. I think when you look at like different Raws Warriors that like kind of like meet the same criteria over the past couple of years, you have guys like OJ Howard that came out of Alabama. You have obviously Kyle Pitts recently, but you also had Noah Fant. And all of these guys, like they underwhelmed their first couple years. Like obviously Kyle Pitts, top 5 pick. He has 1,000 yards his rookie year. He was not better than Jamar Chase. He was not better than a lot of the players that went after him. And the surplus value that he provided for that team, and you look at the same thing with Noah Fant, OJ Howard, it wasn't there. And typically when tight ends are taken in the first round, they don't offer the value you're looking for. And obviously, like recent history, Brock Bowers, Colston Loveland, people are going to point to them. They weren't Roz Warriors. They weren't guys that just blew you away with this 40-yard dash and verticals and all these measurements and just being a true stud in terms of like the workout room. And like that's impressive. That's great. But like where was the production on the field? Like you got outgained by like third round like talent in essence. And like you're telling me that this guy deserves a first round pick. It's too rich for me. I think this is a team that has invested too much in the analytics department. And again, Dan Morgan being a former NFL player, I think he knows the value of trench play. I just it would definitely seem like the team is going backwards taking a player like him, especially in a deep tight end class when you can get maulers in the run game or guys that can move people and still be effective in the pass game at tight end much later in the draft. So that's my take. It's something I've talked about on Twitter. But I do not think Kenyon Sadiq is the pick at 19. The only way I could see him being taken by the Carolina Panthers is if somehow we trade back later in the first. But again, my take is we do not touch him. I don't think he's the right fit. And I definitely think he has bust written all over him because I think people are just too focused on the athleticism.
I think he is the right fit. Let me be clear. I just don't think that the return value for the position would be there. I think he would fit in perfectly with this offense, and I think he's a little bit more than just a high athlete. But to your point, the guys you're talking about, Bowers, Tyler Warren, right? Harold Fannin last year, even these were guys that are pushing close to 1,500 yards, right? And Sadiq had under 600 this year. So I definitely understand the hang up. Frack, do you have your take?
Um, my take is we go all in on Trey Hendrickson. I
Okay.
I mean, he wasn't tagged, right? Correct?
Correct.
Uh, and obviously he was injured this year, but I mean, the 2 years before that, I mean, he had insane seasons. He's a little bit older. We're still gonna have to spend some money on it, but I mean, if we're gonna do something like that, we do it now. Plain and simple. Um,
I I like that. The 2 seasons prior to this one you're talking about, I think he had 17 and a half sacks per season. And since signing that deal with Cincy, he had over 13 sacks every season except this last one, if I recall that information correctly. So, like we talked about, I said we're going big on some sort of defensive free agent. it very well could be Hendrickson. Hendrickson, by the way, posted his goodbye letter, goodbye note on social media earlier. So it seems like even though there's no tag, there's definitely no way that he's going back to Cincinnati. And that's understandable, right? They kind of screwed him back years without giving him a long-term deal. So that Hendrickson would be the best edge rusher the Panthers have had since or probably since Reddick. I think Reddick had a better year than Burns when they were both here, but certainly would be the best edge rushing option we've had in quite some time. So I like that one. I think we're all good here.
That's about
Did
wrapped up
any
for
other
free agency primer.
any other Panthers stuff you want to talk about, Frack, before we get out of here?
I think I'm good unless you guys want to talk about maybe bringing in Kyler Murray at running back.
Maybe he was cut, and he is electric, but I just don't think he has a running back's body, you know. So we'll have to table that one. The quarterback market is going to be interesting, and we'll probably talk about that more next week when free agency actually starts. But guys like Kyler Murray, Kirk Cousins, Geno Smith is probably going to get cut. Tua is going to get cut. There's going to be a lot of veteran options for a lot of the QB needy teams who don't want to draft somebody in the draft or early in the draft. So that'll be interesting. But you heard it here. Kenyon Sadiq not in the first or not at 19 was your take in particular. I'm saying $20 million defender. Frack is saying Trey Hendrickson will likely be that defender. I think that's going to do it for us. I enjoyed this episode. Hopefully, Frack had a good time breaking down some of the options here as free agency approaches. We will be back next week, as we said, talking about some of the free agents we've signed, some of the overall free agent movement, possible trades, that kind of thing, back next Tuesday. And then sometime before the draft, we'll talk about offensive and defensive prospects, but we don't have those dates hammered down yet. But until then, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Twitter, wherever you get your content. For myself, for Steve, and for Frack. Do you want to give us one more roar, Frack, before we get out of here?
I mean, I will. I'd prefer to let y'all hear it in the stadium, but
Yeah.
thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure.